Welcome. Yarra City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and true sovereigns of the land now known as Yarra. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the life in Yarra. We pay our respects to elders from all nations and to their elders past, present, and future. Thanks for joining us tonight to find out more about powering your home or small business with solar. I'm Mel Miller-Yule, and I'm a Sustainability Officer at Yarra City Council. Before we start, a bit of housekeeping. Tonight's session is being recorded, so your microphone and video are turned off. We'll have two Q&A sessions, one in the middle and one at the end of the session. You can pop your questions into the Q&A function, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll read them out to be answered by the presenters. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can tonight, but we may not get through all of them. We may also respond directly to your question in writing in the Q&A section, and this helps us get through more questions. If you have a question that isn't answered by the end of the session, please get in touch with the Yarra Energy Foundation afterward. You can also use the chat function for any technical issues or for anything you'd like to contribute to the discussion, such as links or useful information. First, I'd like to share a bit about what the City of Yarra is doing to address the climate emergency. Yarra is going 100% renewable. Erin, could you flip to the next slide, please? Thanks. There are four main ways that you can take action. You can switch to 100% renewable electricity. Whether you live in a house or an apartment, whether you rent or you own your place, whether you have solar or not, switching to 100% green power is something we all can do to play our part in our climate emergency response. Number two is you can install solar. Tonight, we'll hear how you can install a quality solar system at a discounted price through the Yarra Solar Program. There are government rebates and no interest loans available, which mean that you could be eligible to get solar at no upfront cost. Small businesses will soon be eligible for the state government solar rebates for the first time, and there are new battery rebates available to Yarra residents as well. Number three is create an all-electric home. Once you've installed solar, the electricity that you use while the sun is shining is powered by free energy from the sun. You can make the most of it by getting off gas and going all electric. You can find out more about how to go all electric by watching our recorded webinars on switching to an all electric home. And we'll share that link at the end of this webinar. And number four is you can use less energy. Whether it's draft proofing, insulation, or turning down the thermostat, it all helps. You can read tips to save energy at home on our 100% Renewable Yarra webpage or by watching a recorded webinar. And we'll share those links at the end as well. Going 100% renewable is part of Yarra's climate emergency plan. We've committed to achieving zero net emissions across the entire Yarra community by 2030. And Council is aiming to walk the talk in our own operations. Since last year, all of Council's electricity needs are met by 100% renewable electricity through the Melbourne Renewable Energy Project. We joined with 14 other partners, including councils and universities, to enter a long-term power purchase agreement that drove the construction of a new wind farm near Yarra. We also have 2,920 solar panels installed across 38 council buildings and 6 Tesla 2 batteries installed in community facilities, including leisure centers, libraries, and sports pavilions. We're aiming to double the rooftops in Yarra with solar energy systems by 2024, from 9% in 2019 to 18% in 2024. We're also aiming to increase the capacity of commercial solar by 50% by 2024. And with small to medium businesses soon eligible for state government solar rebates, it will make financial sense for many more businesses to go solar. To make it easier for you to go solar, we've partnered with the Yarra Energy Foundation on the Yarra Solar Program, which you'll hear about tonight. We've also launched a new 100% renewable Yarra section of our website, which looks something like what you see on the screen here. There you'll find useful information on how to switch to green power, go all electric and save energy, and of course, go solar. So when you visit our website and you click on that top right-hand tile about going solar, you can read all about the Yarra Solar Program, and you'll see that there's lots of other information there. Erin, could you click through the next slide, please? Thanks. So no matter your circumstance, if you're just starting out your research, you can find out how it all works and what to look for when selecting a solar system. If you live in or you own a rental property or an apartment, there's information there for you too. And once you've installed solar, you can learn about how to make the most of it by switching to all electric and changing how and when you use energy. And if you need help, you can call the Yarra Energy Foundation, who are here to answer your questions about solar energy bills and saving energy. Next slide, please. There's one other thing I want to mention. 2/3 of homes in Yarra are in a heritage overlay. So many of you might have questions about putting solar on a home in a heritage overlay. We've recently updated the guidance on our website to make it easier to know how to get solar in a heritage overlay. And we'll share that link at the end of the session as well. You can visit that page to find out more. But the key thing to note is highlighted in green in the bottom of this page, which is that if the panels are not visible from a street or a park, there's no need to apply for a planning permit. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Tonight, we're going to hear from Pete Mercuriu from the Yarra Energy Foundation and Paul Blackman of Enviro Group. They'll tell you about the how and why of going solar, the quality solar systems that you can access through the Yarra Solar Program, and government rebates and no interest loans that you may be eligible for. Pete Mercuriu is a senior project manager at the Yarra Energy Foundation. He has 10 years experience in energy efficiency, and solar. Pete's role at YEF, as wearer of many hats, includes advising residents about solar, helping residents compare and understand solar quotes and electricity bills, offering advice on home energy efficiency, energy research, and managing the Yarra Solar Program. Over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Mel, and thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I'll get stuck into it really quickly because I know that time is of the essence with these webinars. Aaron, if you could just skip to the next one. Thank you very much. So, people of Yarra, you may not have heard of the Yarra Energy Foundation, but we were set up about 10 years ago now by the community called for an independent body, a not-for-profit, an organisation that helps to engage and inspire everybody to take practical steps towards a zero carbon future. Yarra City Council, as many of you know, has developed a climate emergency plan in consultation with YEF and the community, which reflects that community vision. The Yarra Solar Program is a joint Yarra City Council and YEF program designed to respond to that climate emergency. Councils and YEF's target for this program is to double residential rooftop solar in Yarra in 4 years and business by 50%. Currently, Yarra solar rooftop penetration is about 10%. The national average is 20, so we've got a little ways to go, I think, which is good for the challenge. Next slide, please, Aaron. Just a quick summary of some of the other things that we do at YEF. There's a good photo of me at the top left there, helping our vulnerable community members. A lot of work with public housing, specifically assisting them with their bills. Last year, we directly put $20,000 cumulatively back in the pockets of residents in helping them switch to cheaper retailers. So if you have any issue with your own retailer, obviously, please give us a call. We also work with businesses, and now that there's some grants available for business, solar is definitely an option. We assisted Stomping Ground Brewery in Collingwood with 90 odd kilowatts of solar, which is great. We also were able to negotiate a donation of 5 kilowatts for the Collingwood Children's Farm for their 40th birthday last year, and assisted Sustainability Victoria and their Take Two team to sign Carlton United Brewery up to that pledge, which is a great achievement. Among other things, of course, we help with schools upgrading their LEDs and with grants too. So would you mind skipping to the next slide, please? All right, our role in the program. So effectively, we act as a link between Yarra City Council and the solar provider, Enviro Group. And we select Enviro Group, which I'll go into a bit later on. But our role is to support you throughout the program and beyond. If you have any questions about solar or anything that we can tie into solar, like a hot water heat pump or your heating and cooling, please give us a call. So we also negotiate a discounted rate of solar up to 23% for top quality product with our partner in Enviro Group. And we're here to ensure participants receive the best service, quality and price for their rooftop solar installation. There's still so many solar companies out in the market and quite a few cowboys. So we're here to act as that buffer. Last year, our target was 100 homes. We managed to hit 91 after 8 months of the program before the dreaded COVID hit. So that resulted in 400 kilowatts installed, and we're zeroing in across all our programs of 2 megawatts of installed solar for the past 3-4 years. To put that into context, it's about 13 kilometers of solar panels end to end, which is pretty amazing. So in the next 12 months, we'd love to hit 200 homes and small businesses. Next slide, please, sir. So why did we select Envira Group? Every so often, every year, we send out a competitive expression of interest with over 60 points of criteria, of which Envira Group met or went beyond, which is great in their responses. So, you know, as I said, there's more than 100 solar providers out there, and we're here to safeguard against you, but also take the guesswork out of solar. Envira Group has a strong and successful history of leading community-oriented solar programs since 2004, which is a really great achievement, and we know that their integrity really shines through. Next slide, please, Aaron. All right, so how will we support you through it all? So Mel touched on it briefly before with Heritage Overlay, but if you have any further questions, please give us a call and we direct you to the right group at Yarra City Council to talk to about that. But we try to make these programs and all our programs as simple and as transparent as possible. I strongly encourage everybody to check your electricity and gas bills as they become increasingly complicated. There's 30 plus retailers in the Victorian retail market alone. So yeah, please feel free to contact us. That website there, compare.energy.vic.gov.au, that is a government website that compares different retailers. Use that one, don't use iSelect or something like that. As usually those other websites, they're commercial business. So typically they'll get some money from a company to put them at the top of the list, whereas this website does not do that. Next slide, please, Aaron. And that's it from me. Paul Blackman, I'll introduce you now. I think Paul's having a bit of issues with his broken PC webcam. And he's trying to access on his phone, of course. It always happens when you least need it to. But we'll see if he can access that. I'll help him in a moment. But Paul, he's been working in solar, 10, 15 years in the solar industry. He's seen the ups and downs of the industry over the years, and he's really a steadying influence on the business when the industry goes crazy, which seems to happen too often. Paul, are you there with us? Can we hear you? I can see you. There you are. I can hear you.
I think I'm unmuted now, and I'll start my video.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, how's that?
I still see Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
You'll have to select the other person of me.
You two look similar. There you are. All right.
Yeah. How's that?
Aaron, that's great. Thanks, Paul. Just
wonderful.
Feel free to jump right in. Aaron, if you could jump to the next slide. Awesome.
Okay, so thank you, Peter, and thank you to the team at Yarra Council as well. So I'll be guiding you through the more retail-based technical parts of the presentation tonight about the basics of solar, maybe the harder parts as well. And as always, I'm led as much as I need to be by the audience. And so any questions at all, type them through to the chat screen and I'll answer them more or less as I go or as directed by the panelists who are guiding the chat session. So look, a lot of you may know of business already. We started trading on High Street, Thornbury in about 2004. And we've grown then to be one of the more solid solar installation companies in Melbourne. We don't aim for anything too big. We haven't ever attempted to go nationwide or conquer the country, anything like that. All we've done is we've opened a shop about 10 years ago in Castlemaine, which actually moved to the outskirts of Castlemaine to Newstead. We tried to open a shop in Frankston, once, and that lasted a few years. Then we closed that. So basically, yeah, we have a good history. Nice, solid business, still privately owned by a chap called Mick Harris, who founded the Alternative Technology Association about 30 years ago now. So the mainstay of our business is regular, everyday people such as yourselves, trying their best to get a good solar power system installed, with or without batteries, of course, and we'll delve into that later. And we do commercial solar as well. So the largest that we've installed is a 355 kilowatt system, actually up in Wangaratta, which is still going strong. And so we do avoid the big business stuff. We avoid the multi-megawatt stuff. That's all handled by less independent outsourced engineers and sometimes the power companies. So yeah, I tend to not read through the slides either as they're on the screen. So that slide there introduces us, and you'll get a copy of the slides later on. So next slide. So very simplistic and lovely moving image there of how solar power works on your home. Sometimes the diagrams don't even make that much sense, but people always still feel the need to ask about how solar power works. Mainly, you've got panels on your roof, as many as you like, and as many as you can fit these days. The panels generate electricity in DC, which stands for direct current, that flows down to an inverter, and sometimes smaller inverters called micro-inverters, but still it's an inverter of some sort, and that converts the DC power into AC power, which is what your house uses, which stands for alternating current, which is what all electricity within the home is. And all that solar does in its raw form is inject a constant supply when the sun's out of power into your home switchboard. And so anything then that is switched on that draws power from the board sucks it basically out of the solar as a first preference. There are no real switches or decision making involved. It's all just based on voltages going in and out of the board. And so what happens is that if a cloud comes over and therefore the solar stops, the grid kicks in and you get instant supply from the grid. That's seamless. And in reverse, if there's too much solar and your house isn't using it, the electricity will nice and naturally flow back out to the grid, and you'll get credited for that by the power company. And there's a big asterisk next to that sentence that I'll cover later on, because in some patches of inner Melbourne, in the city power network, which is where the Yarra projects normally are, the grid is becoming more or less full, which is the simplest way of putting it. And city power, just in the last few weeks, have started, in some cases, restricting the input of excess solar into the grid, which is not good news, but we'll cover that a little bit later on in the presentation. Let's go to the next slide. And I'm aware that there's a few questions there on the chat, so when I get a chance to read through them, I'll endeavour to give them some due answers. So how does solar power work as far as savings is concerned? So the first thing is that we'll have a look at your bills. If you're interested and you send your bills through to us, we'll pop them in graphical form like we have here on this graph. So the red is a typical home that is biased towards summer power consumption, meaning they probably use air conditioning and they probably use gas for their heating. The yellow is an overlay of what a solar system that's appropriately sized might do for that home. Obviously, there's more solar in summer and less in winter, and that particular yellow line there will provide 100% of this home's power consumption over the course of a year, allowing for fluctuations day in, day out with weather. And if that's an appropriately sized system that generates 100% of their energy consumption, generally that will save roughly 2/3 on your whole power bill. And so the reason that it's not the complete bill is that you've got service charges within the bill that can't really be attacked very well with solar power, and also the interplay between daytime and nighttime on a summer. On a summer's day, you'll produce a lot more solar than your house will use, and some of that will go back out to the grid, and you get paid a lower rate for that than what electricity is worth. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there. Next slide, please. Now this one here, a slightly different graph. If you could go back one slide to that graph, that shows quite an oversized solar system relative to that house, and also shows a winter buyer's house. So they're using more heating, and those people in this example are a little bit averse to using aircon, which is common as well. And that particular one produces 50% more annually than what that house will use, and that will generate 80% of a person's bill as far as costs saved, which is pretty good. That's getting towards almost towards the whole thing. And if you break down the bill as far as the power consumption section, that's going to more than negate the actual power consumption section, with a little bit remaining on the bill for your service charges. Next slide, please. About the quality aspects of the Enviro Group installations with the support of the Yarra Energy Foundation. Look, there's 2 million or 2.5 million solar installs in Australia to date. It's fair to say that the first chunk of them were done pretty circumspect across the industry, with fairly lackluster guidelines and regulations by the authorities. But since then, the authorities have really tightened up, and most installations that you'll see are pretty good, right? They're all pretty safe. You know, there's no systems catching fire around town, as you'd know. But there's a huge difference between a merely compliant installation and an installation that ticks every box of both the Clean Energy Council codes and the Australian standards for solar connection, which is AS 4777 and AS 3000, among a few others as well. And that comes down to things like spacing of the panels, clearances from gutters, clearances from ridges, the ways and the directions that the solar conduit, for example, is connected into the switches. And so one of the guidelines is to only use what's called bottom entry into the isolator boxes, and that prevents water ingress and leakage over time. So an example like that is something that even though it's best practice to do, it's not commonplace, because a lot of the installers don't even understand how to do it, and it might be easier to do it the other way. And when you get an inspection, where an inspector who's a licensed representative of Energy Safe Victoria comes along, look, I've seen inspections last shorter than a minute. I actually got my own house installed last year, and the inspector ran into my garden on a Sunday afternoon in the rain, had a look inside my meter box, and ran away. And that took less than a minute, because it was cold and rainy. And I didn't know who the inspector was. They're an independent body, and sometimes they're a bit random. But I know that he didn't go on the roof, and I know that he didn't go near where the inverter was located. And so there's probably then 90% of the system that went uninspected, right? So that's a personal example of how grey the compliance process can be within solar. And Peter referred to this earlier on. There's a 60-point checklist that City of Yarra and YEF went through to select Enviro Group as the winners of this tender, and so we endeavour in all cases to tick every box that's applicable for a very high quality solar installation. Next slide, please. So how we size up the system and how we price it up for you. First of all, we would look at the power bills and look at your power consumption and recommend something that is appropriately sized there. And thinking back to a few slides earlier with those graphs, you'll have the choice of a system that generates 100% of your power consumption, or possibly one that generates 50% more, and we call that a future-proof system. And in fact, anywhere in between those or anything else is possible too, but they're probably the first two sizes that we'll give you. Another reason actually that people prefer the larger one is that it caters for the future a bit better. So anyone thinking of electric cars, electric heating as opposed to gas heating, electric cooktops, the future is definitely electric in that sense, because electricity can be generated 100% renewably, whereas gas can't. So we'll take into account your bills. We'll look at the space available on your roof and the shading, if there is any. We'll look at roof pitches. We'll look at your meters and your switchboards. When we did the last presentation, it was all in a very COVID wary state of affairs a couple of months ago, but that's very much subsiding, which is great. So we're able to come out now and have a look at your home in a good old-fashioned way, have a look to see if it all suits. But if you prefer, we can do it all remotely as well. We can get it 99% right with the online tools that we have these days. Next slide, please. Switchboards are probably the most troublesome section these days of a solar installation. The roof is reasonably predictable, but switchboards can be all over the shop. And so especially for the Yarra program, a lot of the homes are older. A lot of the homes have very old and decrepit switchboards that may have barely been kept up to date in say 100 years due to the ages of the houses. And also a lot of the residents rather are quite energy savvy, so there aren't too many big, luxurious, spacious switchboards. A lot of them are old and a bit tight, a bit hard to work with. So we need to consider that, because that's the majority of where we do our electrical work in your home. So the switchboard on the left, that's what we call a full switchboard that has no further room to add any additional switches in there. So we can do a couple of things to that. We can change out a few of those switches, and we can replace the safety switch in there with combined switches called RCBOs. Represents a couple of $100 of work there that we can do, but then you'll get your solar switch, which is one switch only, fitted into that board nice and neatly. Or in some cases to the left and or the right of that board, we can add a little extra enclosure and get things going. You'll notice behind that too, that's probably a heavy concrete or brick wall, which can be really hard to work on. So look, all that sort of stuff we take into account before we give you a quote. That middle switchboard is nice and big. That's a newer sort of a home, bigger home, where that switchboard is probably outdoors and much easier to access, and plenty of room in there to put all of our switches in. If we need one, that's great. If we need three, because you're a three-phase house, that's great too. If we need some extra monitoring in there, or if you want extra monitoring, that'll fit as well. And then across to the right, it's another example of a full switchboard. So when you go home tonight, or you probably are home as we speak, you can have a look at your boards and you can identify whether you've got an easy to work on board or a hard one. Next slide. Why install solar PV now? So we always use the term PV, thinking that everybody knows what it is, but PV is the abbreviation for photovoltaic, which is an effect of physics that was discovered back in the early century of last century, around the time that Einstein was around. Photovoltaic just means light converting light to electricity, right? We call it PV, and they're the panels that you get up on your roof. So why do it now? Well, people were doing it 10 years ago, right? And Dr. Carl from Triple J did it 30 years ago. So it's not just now that you should do it. But people are doing it now because electricity prices continue to rise. There's a good Victorian government state subsidy, which is really handy. It's $1,850 of free money, plus another $1,850 of interest-free loan as well. There's a income cap or restriction on that of $180,000 taxable income per household that you need to know about as well. There are federal government grants as well on solar that are available for everybody, and they're getting phased out over time. So the longer you wait, the less that they'll be. And I think the most important reason people are getting solar right at this point of time, the market is well and truly locked down now with very, very high quality product in most cases. And we know exactly what we're doing. We know how the products work, how the panels work, how the inverters work. So we're probably at the most stable and the most certain time as well as we've ever been. And that's coupled with, I think, realistically, the cheapest solar prices that have ever been available too. So panels especially are almost embarrassingly cheap now per panel compared to what they used to be at any time in history. Next slide.
Paul, I'll just interrupt you briefly there.
Yes.
We've got some questions coming through via the Q&A and via the chat. So
Yeah, I
if
can see
it's all right
those.
with you, we'll do a quick Q&A now, and then we'll do some more at the end.
Yeah, completely fine. So I can see that chat. So I'll just slide up
Great.
there and go back up
Great.
to the top and start answering those questions.
Yeah, if it's all right with you, I'll just read them out. Some of them have already been answered in the chat.
Okay,
So
sure.
we've got a list here of questions. I'll just read them out if it's all right. So Ken asks, we want to put in solar panels, but we're worried that the installation might result in water leaks. What warranties are offered as part of the program? And there's a related question, and just relating to tiled roofs. What if the roof is tiled? Does the installation result in broken tiles?
So thanks for the question, Ken. Good question. Obviously, nobody wants a leaking roof that's with or without solar panels. Firstly, we don't like creating leaks. That's something that it would be the worst result for us. We do dozens sometimes of installations a week, and we've knocked out now between 10 and 15,000 installations. And so it has to be said that the very, very, very vast majority of those haven't created roof leaks, and that's partly installation quality, but also it's well and truly locked down installation standards in conjunction with the plumbing industry and the roofing industry that make that happen. So with a tile roof especially, we don't do any protrusions into the tiles. We put a Z-shaped bracket in under the lip of the tile, push the tile back, put the bracket in, pull the tile back down again. And anyone that's walked on a tile roof before, especially a homeowner, you know that if you walk around carefully on a tile roof and you step not on the ridges of the tiles, but you step on the joins of the tiles, you'll know how to walk on a roof and not break a tile. That said, of course, occasionally accidents happen and we break a tile a week or something like that on our installs. The main thing there is that when you run a mature and responsible installation crew who are confident about their work, they'll just put their hand up and say, hey, tile broken, and that needs to be replaced, right? So we take that on to do that ourselves. But we do ask for the homeowner's assistance there. We love it if you've got spare tiles, because we can't really be running around all over Melbourne at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon trying to find a tile that will suit your house. And it does need to be noted that a tile roof was never designed to be worked on or walked on. So it's a case of, yes, we install it as carefully as we can. No, we almost never break a tile. When we do, we will rectify that. And we also have a 10-year warranty on our installations as well. But look, the intention is not that you ring up in 9 years' time and say, my roof leaked for 8 years. The intention is that we don't create a leak in the first place. And that is, as I said, just to reiterate, by running a responsible and mature, not in age, but attitude installation crew who can deal with those issues if they arise. With a tin roof, we simply whiz out the pretty poor quality screws that are in there and replace them in the same holes with much better screws and a much better sealing technology that in theory makes your roof stronger and better sealed than what it was when the roof was put up. So the leaking thing shouldn't be an issue.
Thanks,
Um,
Paul.
mhm.
Another question, we've got a question from Anne. How long will my solar system last? And does the effectiveness decline over time? If so, what time period?
Rightio. So a few parts of that question. So one of the Enviro Group's first tranches of installations was on the Westwick Sustainable Community in Brunswick West on Victoria Road, opposite the squash courts there. It's an old school. We have, I think, 12 installations there, all on a impossible to access ever again double-story roof on a 35-degree incline. And every one of those systems is still working after, I think it's 14 years now. And every one of them is still producing solar at at a rate or better than the quote predicted at the time. Right. So when you do a solar quotation to Clean Energy Council standards, which actually is not even commonplace to do that, would you believe? So there's still a lot of quotations out there just scribbled on paper. Here you go, buy this. So if you're going to stick to the Clean Energy Council approved retailer standards, you'll use their accredited prediction figures for solar collection. And within those figures, there's at least a few percent. I think it might be 6% from memory. There's at least a 6% allowance for drop off in performance already, and dust and other debris as well. So your system will work better when we put it in than what the quotation says it will work for a start. So further to that, anecdotally, a solar panel will lose performance based on physical design of between 0.5% and 1% per year. It's likely a lot closer to 0.5%. So that means over 10 years, it'll lose only 5% of its performance. And that's why, going back a few sentences, within that tolerance of how we quote it, 5% is less than the 6%, which means that in 10 years' time, your system should still be working as well as what we said that it would work when we installed it for you. So other than that, the vast majority of solar systems that we would have installed, which is decent panels or better with a decent inverter or better, should really work well and truly longer than 10 years. You've got a minimum warranty on every aspect of these systems of 10 years. But look, a good solar panel, so a best available solar panel, should last indefinitely. Right? There are panels from the 80s that were made in Australia by BP on farmsteads and things like that. They still work. So you're a very unlucky person to have a good quality solar system that ever stops working. So hopefully that reassures you there. And again, we wouldn't have been chosen for this program if it were otherwise. And also the product that we use too is within the world's top 1 or 2 manufacturers as well. So there's nothing sketchy going on.
Thanks, Paul.
Next question,
That's
Mel.
great. Yeah. Question from Anne. You may have touched on this a bit, but the question is, well, how do I know what system size I need? Maybe you can talk through how you work with a household to decide that.
Yeah, so the first thing is the word need. I try not to use it because anyone can get any sized solar system they like. If you're on a budget, you can get a really small one that will generate maybe half your power, and you might be happy with that. If you're feeling a bit more luxurious, you can try and generate double your power. And we do that all the time. We have people generating double and or triple, if not sometimes quadruple, the amount of power that they use, and they're doing that for their own personal reasons, and they'll be making money from the grid rather than ever paying a bill again. But and if you've got your pencil and paper out now, I'll demystify it all for you and make my job sound really overblown and boring. Just take your electricity bill, look for the average daily usage in kilowatt hours. If you're in the city of Yarra and you're anywhere near normal, that will be somewhere between 8 and 12 kilowatt hours. Just find the annual average there. Take that figure and divide that by 3.7. And that will give you the size of solar system that you should put on in order to generate 100% of your annual energy. So if you're using 10 kilowatt hours a day, 10 divided by 3.7, I think is something like 3.2. And that will say then that you need a 3.2 kilowatt system, which is around 9 panels these days, and that will get you 100% of your annual energy generated. So from that point, we take off a few percent if your house faces east or west. We take off a few more percent if you've got some shade there. And again, if you want a larger system, you just add panels to that. And there's your answer. And you can become a solar expert in no time.
That's great, Paul. It's really a practical advice to help people get started. We do have a few more questions here, but I think I'll let you get on with your presentation and we'll continue on with the Q&A at the end.
Yep, great. So that's fine. So look, as far as the product selection, I'm going to encourage people to not focus on the product too much because it's all been pre-authorized and pre-selected by Yarra Energy Foundation and the council. And this is product that, in our minds, is like buying a Toyota. It's incredibly well known in the industry. It's incredibly reliable and reputable as well. And for those in the know, it's as good as you would want for an everyday solar system. So if you pick through the specifications though, it's a 370 watt panel. It's made by a brand called Trina, who have been a consistent presence in Australia since the beginning of the industry, which is great. They've never left the scene, and they were here at the start, and they've always had a great reputation, which is good. And they're proudly Chinese as well, I need to say. So people do ask where the panels come from. Sometimes that's just a matter of habit. But Trina are very, very, very proudly Chinese, and we think that's fantastic. They make a great product. You've got a 10-year, which I need to strike that out. It's actually 12. So it's a 12-year manufacturing warranty, which is the other word for a defect warranty, which is pretty standard in the industry. But it's a 25-year performance warranty. So getting back to Anne's question earlier, and this is normal for solar product of this pricing category. If the panel just snaps in half or it wasn't made well and it just breaks, you've got a 12-year warranty on that. If that doesn't happen and the panel performance itself drastically deteriorates, then you've got a 25-year warranty on that. And so they allow for roughly a 20% reduction within that warranty, but it's likely to be much less than that anyway. And they're what's called a tier 1 panel, but every panel for sale is tier 1 these days anyway. So that category has really become a little bit meaningless. Next slide, please. So we have been asked to supply what's called what we call the premium panel, right? So this is a panel by the brand Winnaco out of Taiwan. It's a panel that hasn't been designed to fit a price point. So there's quite a few construction techniques that are used there to change that panel into, change it from merely a good value panel into a version of what is the best panel that can be made on the planet. So they've got a 25-year complete warranty on every single aspect of the panel. And look, the real answer to how long panels last for, which nobody really knows, look, these panels really, I'd be very surprised if they didn't last forever. So we don't have any broken ones on our books after using them for about 8 years, with none at all, no issues whatsoever. So given that they all work perfectly well, I would say in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, they should all be still working too. Whereas the frank answer about the other panels, the Trina brand, is that, yeah, we do deal with some broken panels once every few weeks in our office. But given that we've installed tens of thousands of them, I think that is okay. And I think that that's acceptable and possibly to be expected. So that brand there is called Winaco. There's only one live solar panel testing site in Australia, by the way, which you can all Google, which is fun, called Desert Knowledge. What's the website called? If you just Google Desert Knowledge solar power, you'll find it. It's a testing site in Alice Springs that has been there for about 10 years, and there's about, I think, 20, 30 brands installed there. And Winaco is one of the brands that is consistently outperforming everything else there that's been installed, which is great. Next slide, please. These will be on the spec sheets that we send to you. So this is just an example of how Winaco as a brand deliberately surpass what is the minimum standard. And so just to pick that apart a bit, it's easy to make a panel that complies to industry standards, but it's harder to make a panel that surpasses the industry standards. And so these panels surpass those first two categories by 3 times, about 10% higher in mechanical load, about 20% better with hail impact. And then there's a bunch of voluntary enhanced quality testings down there, which are all, look, they're going to look fairly technical, but you can understand, let's say the middle one there called dynamic mechanical load. That's where you've got a fake thing, I don't know what it would be called, pushing and pulling on the panels, right, to try and make them break, similar to what you might see in IKEA or in the Rivers shoe catalogue, things like that, are not standard, not done normally on panels. And so this is one of the reasons that Winaco are a premium panel, and they cost about, from memory, about 20%, maybe 30% more money per panel than the Trina. So they'll be offered to you if you like as an optional upgrade. Next slide. Inverters, otherwise known as the heart of the system. It's true that in most systems you've only got one inverter. So if that does break, you're in trouble for an amount of time that it takes to get that inverter fixed. So Sungrow is, I think anyway, the largest manufacturer on earth of all inverters. Again, proudly out of China. And they've been in Australia now about 6 years, and we've had them for about 4 years. And they're proving to be about as reliable as many of the European ones, right? So they're great, and they're half the price of the European inverters. And I've got one of them on my wall as well. And they're great little units, and you're going to get a 10-year warranty with them, which is good. Next slide. As an upgrade option, and again, we were requested to supply this through the program. This manufacturer called SMA is 100% made in Germany, and they've been making inverters now for over 20 years. And if you bought solar, say 10 years ago in Australia, they were probably 80% of the industry, and everybody used them. And they've got a very, very, very long proven track record for being super reliable. So it's there for people that so people have been asking us since we started the program, why would you choose to upgrade to the German inverter? And the answer is always a bit tricky, because they're both wholehearted recommendations. So I think it's more a case of some people have literally had a bad experience in consumer electronics with some of the bargain product that's around, and so for those people, they might feel safer buying an inverter brand that has a longer established performance history. I think it's probably a third or maybe only a quarter of the Yarra program people who have taken up a German inverter as an added extra. So I think it is a personal choice. It's like when you buy a fridge, do you buy a Miele where the food will be kept exactly as cold as if you buy a no-name white goods brand of fridge? A lot of it is simply personal preference. Next slide, please. So the real inverter upgrade is to change technologies entirely. And that is to go for a more modern technology called micro-inverters. So rather than have one big chunky inverter that does the whole thing in one go mounted on the ground, you would have separate little inverters up underneath each panel. So this type of technology was invented from scratch only 10 years ago. It's fresh off the development desk, if you like. And Enphase, as a manufacturer, have become in the last 6 to 7 years, they've become the most reliable inverter product on the planet. They are built so well, it's not funny. So they're submersible in water. They run up to, I think, 75 degrees Celsius. And so all of our premium installations across the board have these inverters. They are more expensive, right? It's going to cost you in some cases double the money, if not more, for an Enphase system. But they will last longer. They will work a bit better. They are more flexible as far as the installation is concerned. They're monitoring as far as the solar generated and also electricity consumption of your house. The monitoring is second to none. And the product diagnosis, if you've got any issues with it 6 years down the track, everyone can log into the system and have a look at daily energy fluctuations, all of that per panel and per inverter for the entire history of the system. So it very, very much is a premium product. Again, personal choice, but they're point 4 there. If you do have shady roofs, complicated roofs, and more of an architectural style home, there's many reasons that you would be encouraged to use the Enphase microinverter system. They're fantastic. Next slide, please. So yeah, as you're driving around town looking at solar power systems, some of them are more complicated than others, and that's a big aspect that informs the pricing of the system. So this photo here shows a system with it's got, I can't really point on this slide, but we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and behind that 5, we can see 5 sets of solar panels. Most of them are facing in different directions. They're on 2 different roof surfaces, and you can appreciate, or I hope you can appreciate, that the amount of time and effort that goes into wiring up such a system is quite a lot more difficult than with a simple system. And so that's why there can be quite a large price variation between a very, very simple single array system and a multiple array system with everything installed on different parts of the roof and facing out different ways. But that's an example of what we take into account when we give you a customized quote. Next slide, please. So this is a little mini system with 6 panels and 3 of them facing east and 3 facing north. A little known technical limitation in the industry is that if you use a normal inverter, and those first 2 that I showed you, they're called string inverters, and they're what I would call the normal inverter. If you use one of them, you need to have at least 5 panels facing all in the same direction for that to work. And that allows the electricity to run in one long string and run in the same voltage and the same current and run all that down to an inverter. So if you don't have a roof space where you can get 5 panels running in a row, then you can't use those inverters, not really. And so in order to get that to work, we would use micro inverters on this system. So one little inverter is installed under each one of those panels, and each little panel there is operating 100% independently from the one next to it. And so we can actually place those panels wherever we like. But that will be a micro inverter system there, and that's going to be a compulsory design choice for such a small roof, if there are any that come our way. Next slide. Here's one of our award-winning systems, albeit it won runner-up award. This is out in Blackburn, which is a long way away in some people's minds from Richmond or Abbotsford or Clifton Hill. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 arrays on that roof on 7 different directions, all of them in partial shade. So you do get houses like that in the city of Yarra as well. It's got a bit of an Italian kind of a inner city feel to it in some sections of city of Yarra, with housing that may have started off 150 years old, with extensions here, extensions there, double story, triple story. And so if we do get very difficult roofs, again, we'll be using micro inverters as well for them. And they will work fantastically, right? There's no problem there. It's just that it becomes a more difficult install, well and truly workable, but do expect it to cost just that little bit more. Next slide. Here's a very normal looking installation. The pricing in the industry that you see published on the newspaper is all founded on rooftops like this, more of an outer suburban roof. So installers love working out in Doreen and Wallen because all the rooftops are like this. You can run around wearing a pair of Dunlop volleys on a roof like that and get 2 or 3 installations done per day. Nice and neat, plenty of space to work. And if we see rooftops like that, we love it as well. And we can put more panels on, and they do look a bit neater. And that's where you get your basic everyday pricing that is available to everybody, of course, if you've got a roof that's easy to work on. Next slide, please. That's another example. Using with a roof that is a clip lock style of roof. So those who are into roofing, I am now, but I didn't used to be. There are styles of roofs that don't have any penetrations in it, and then no screws and no holes. And so we need to use special clamps. You can see them at the front of the installation there under those panels, special clamps that go in and they clamp over the top of the ridges of the clip lock. And they're a solid aluminium bracket that we need to use a minimum amount of in order to keep the installation engineered so that it doesn't blow off, but that's an easy thing to do. And that's your ultimate way of having a leak-free system, because we don't make any roof penetrations at all, except to get the one cable through to connect the panels down to the inverter. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, there we go. There's a magnified version of a clip lock clamp. They're about $7 each to purchase. And so that represents a pricing change as well if we need to use a clip lock style of roof. There's 3 or 4 different roof profiles of clip lock as well, and we can work with any of them. Next slide. Rightio, batteries. Hey, do you want to take a break for some of those questions before we jump into the battery bit?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do the next Q&A section now, and then you can finish up your presentation after that. We've got a question, might be a quick question. Where do inverters get installed?
Rightio, so they go on ground level, on a wall, at eye level or roughly eye level. They go somewhere in between where the panel wiring comes down, and somewhere in between there and the switchboard. We choose, if we can, a south wall or an east wall because they're more protected from the sun. Maybe a west wall, and we try and avoid a north wall because they're too sunny and too hot. So they go in general, well, outdoors first. They're all outdoors rated, which is good. In a sheltered location, out of the sun, in between where your panels and your switchboard is located. What we don't do, we don't plonk an inverter where it suits us and not you, and then just run away from the site. So we'll always consult you about where it goes. If you want somewhere super tricky, we can do that with extra additions for cable runs and so forth. So we don't shy away from that either. But yeah, most people have a service corridor or hallway, or where your heating is or something like that. We generally put the inverter down there, and it's a much neater piece of installation than any air conditioner or heater or anything else.
Great, thanks, Paul. And a related question from Ken: do the solar system electrics go into the meter or the switchboard or both?
Never into the meter, never, ever, ever. So we ignore the meter completely, and we don't even go anywhere near it. We just need your meter number for the paperwork, and sometimes we'll be checking whether you have a 3-phase meter or single-phase meter, but other than that, no, we don't go anywhere near it. We go straight into the switchboard of the house. And for those of you that are complete novices at this, I know some people are, the switchboard is the same word or the same thing as a fuse box or a fuse board. People do get not so much confused, but if you've had a good run in your home and you never have had to do anything in it, you might not even know where it is. So it'll be in your hallway, behind the front door in an older house, or on the porch, or in a garage in a new house. And so switchboard, fuse box, interchangeable words. I just want to go back a step to the question about where the inverters are located. That answer applied for the normal type of inverters. If you want to choose a micro-inverter system, then there is no inverter in that sense to place anywhere. All the inverters go up on the roof and you don't see any of them. And then wiring comes down into your switchboard only, and we install a very small monitor type thing, which is about the size of a modem, usually into that switchboard or into a very, very small switchboard next to that. So if you're concerned about locating an inverter, so architectural style houses with a lot of glass, if you just don't want one anywhere, if it's unsightly, then choose a micro inverter system and you won't need to deal with it at all.
Great, thanks, Paul. We have a question from Perry. I recently received texts from our electricity retailer and our network operator regarding the possibility of unplanned electrical outages this summer. If there's a power outage to a solar powered house without a battery connected, does your solar system still function?
So in big, big, big capital letters with an exclamation mark at the end of it, no, it won't work. And it's not designed to work, and it's not allowed to work. And so don't buy solar for that reason. I've come up against a couple of people in my history who did buy it for that reason, and they got very, very, very grumpy when the solar system didn't work during a blackout. So there's a multitude of ways to explain that. One easy way is that it's a technical requirement that they disconnect themselves from the grid in the event of an outage to prevent power flowing back out into the grid when the workers assume that it's dead and there's no power there. But the other reason is they're just not designed that way. So all systems that we sell, or most that we sell, are called grid interactive or grid synchronized systems. And from a design principle from the ground up, they rely on the grid existing for the inverter to synchronize to the waveform of the grid. Once that's done, it allows the power to flow through the system the way that it's intended. And that, in spirit, would allow the inverter to be maybe a third of the price of an inverter that didn't work that way. So that's a much more technical reason.
Great, thanks, Paul. That's really clear. It's good for people to know that that's the way it works. I'll take one more question now, and then we can get on with the last of the presentation. The question is, can you install panels vertically on unshaded walls facing north or west?
You can put it in. You can put a panel wherever you feel like it. You can put it in the shade under an oak tree, and that is fine, right? So there's a table that we can send out to anyone who wants it, where we've got all orientations of all installs that are possible, and it even shows a south-facing install, south at vertical south. And I think from memory, you still get a third of the power of a northerly install, even if you face it south. So it's a mathematical formula. It's just based on the surface area exposed to the sunlight. So yes, vertical it's all fine, but it just won't work as well. So I think we've got we do have a system on the Footscray Hospital or Western Hospital in Footscray or Sunshine. There's panels there on a vertical service facing out north, and they're done more for architectural reasons. So the answer is an overwhelming yes. And I wouldn't ever discourage anyone from doing that. So I mentioned ages ago that panels are super cheap these days, right? So even a panel facing the wrong way these days is better value than a panel purchased 10 years ago facing north. Right, so don't be afraid of that. If you don't want them on your north, if you want them on another face, choose that, and then we can simply help you predict how they will work, and we can adjust the system size accordingly. So that's a really important point as well that people overlook. If the panels hypothetically were to work 1/3 less well, right, 1/3 less well than they should, then all you have to do is put on 1/3 more panels, and you will get overall the same result on an annual basis. So if you have the space for it and the budget, you can still achieve the result that you want with brute force, and it will work.
Great, thanks, Paul. And so it sounds like get in touch with Enviro Group if you want to find out more about where to place your panels to suit your home. I'll let you get on with the last of your presentation. We've got about 5 minutes left before we wrap up. So I know you've got some things to say about batteries before we finish up. So I'll hand over to you.
So batteries are a very, 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 very popular request for people to talk about these days. They're a great concept, just like getting a water tank for your garden. When it rains too much, the water runs into the tank and you save it for later and you water your plants from the water in the tank. It's a beautiful concept. It's roughly the same concept with batteries and solar. So you charge a battery up with excess solar during the day, and then at nighttime you run your house with the battery. So technically the solution works really well. It's just that batteries haven't yet decreased in price down to a point where people find the numerical answer attractive. So that can be disappointing for people. The media, I think, have done a pretty poor job here. The media are always saying things like batteries coming down in price for whatever reason, when in fact a lot of our battery combination products have gone up in price, and they've gone up in price due to installation factors, safety requirements, mechanical protection requirements, and electrical requirements as well. So the three ones on the screen here on the left, there's the Enphase mini battery, right? They're in units of 1.2 kilowatt hours each, and they will cost you from about $3,500 as a minimum amount to be installed, and they go up from there. The middle battery there is an all-in-one product called Redback Technologies. They're Australian owned and designed. They're not made here. And just so we can get the pricing out of the way early on, anyone looking at a Redback battery system will need to allocate roughly $10,000 minimum more than the solar, right? So now that said, this is the first presentation I've done since the Victorian government announced that the solar battery rebate is now open slather with no postcode restrictions at all, which is really exciting. But, and I'll have to just backtrack on that excitement for a bit, but there are other restrictions too, and you need to have solar already pre-installed. You need to have solar of a minimum 5 kilowatts before they will take an application for the battery rebate. And the installation needs to be within 5 years in the past as well. So look, we can send you plenty more information about that later on. The product on the right of the screen here is the Tesla Powerwall. It's probably the best battery in existence in Australia, but beware, it isn't cheap, and the starting price on that is about $16,000 to $16,500. But it will power your average home in Victoria for one whole day, or a energy conscious home, it'll power for 2 days, maybe 3 days. Next slide. Because we've only got 5 minutes, I think Mel said. So I'll skip through this very quickly. Batteries are still quite expensive. Down the bottom, it explains where some of the extra price loading comes from. So fireproof fireproofing, complex switchboards, bollards, switchboard rearrangements. They're all quite heavy pieces of work to do that are over and above what an actual battery would cost you. Next slide. Okay, conscious again of running out of time. So we can send you all the information you like if anyone expresses interest on it, but monitoring of batteries and monitoring of the way that your home works after you've got a battery is probably the most powerful aspect of getting a battery. There's a very happy looking person, actually you can't see his face, but a happy person driving his little console with all these graphs on it, and you'll get that with a battery installation. You won't quite get that with any solar installation that we do. Next slide. Some pricing, and this can be sent out to you. You can see that prices for smaller systems start off at around about the $3,500 mark, not including the state government rebate. The better quality systems with the Enphase product start off at about $5,000, and the larger systems there are between just under $5,500 and getting towards $8,500. To upgrade to Winaco panels, which were the ones out of Taiwan, about $250 per kilowatt, which is roughly $1,000 for a 5 kilowatt system as an upgrade price. And I'd say that's well worth the money. Next slide, please. Addition. So it's really important to just get this out of the way up front. So the previous slide was for the super easy house, single story tin roof, very easy access. Every time we have to split an array up into 2 separate sections or more, we add that $261 there. That's mostly electricians' fees and wiring and switching. Steep rooftops cost more, up to 35 degrees. High roofs cost more. That's your old style Victorian style homes plus 2-story. And some switchboards need a bit of work, and usually per circuit, we're having to charge about $83 extra. Next slide. Batteries, we glossed over that before. There's your complete system size, system pricing for a solar system, including solar. A very typical installation would be the second one there, 5.5 kilowatts of solar with a 7.2 kilowatt hour battery, about 14,000. So if you're interested in batteries, we've done a few of these systems through the Yarra program already. Think in real terms between 14 and 16,000. Next slide. Next steps, really easy. You don't need to do anything in principle other than to contact Yarra Energy Foundation, register your details either with a phone call or an email, and your contact details will get through to me and my team within a few days, and then a few days after that. And sorry, Peter, if things get very busy from time to time, but in principle, within a few days or a week or so of your initial inquiry, we'll be in touch with you, inviting you to send through all your details and your power bills, and we can give you a call and have a chat. And installations, based on confirmations now, are taking place probably at this stage for new jobs as of now, probably February next year.
Thanks, Paul. That seems like a good place to wrap up. We've reached the end of the slide deck and the end of the presentation.
Sorry, Mel, to interrupt. Just next slide, Aaron. Real quick. Okay, so yes, sorry to interrupt, Mel. But yeah, just a bit of a call to action. If you are interested in receiving a no obligation free quote, head to our website. All the details are listed there. And any other queries, feel free to contact me directly. I've sent my email. I'm writing it now in the chat. All right, all done, Mel. Yours.
Great, thanks, Pete, and thanks, Paul. Next slide, please, Aaron. Thanks again for joining us tonight, everyone, and we hope you learned a lot about going solar and you've gotten inspired to follow up by contacting YEF to get some more information and the next step to get a quote for solar from Enviro Group. And a big thank you to Paul and Pete. For more information, you can visit the links that are here. We'll also send them to you by email. You'll have an email in your inbox at the end of this session so that you don't have to write down the links here. So there's a link to the Yarra Solar Program on YEF's website, a link to the 100% renewable Yarra pages from Yarra City Council, where you can find out more about those 4 actions that I spoke about earlier. Also links where you can watch previous webinar recordings to get a bit more information about saving energy or going all electric. And the link to finding out about installing solar in a heritage overlay in Yarra. So please check those out. There's also a quick survey in that email, so we'd love to have your feedback on this session. So thanks everyone again. Have a great evening and a great holiday season. This is the last of our climate action webinars for this year, so we hope to see you at one of our events in the new year.
Thanks, Mel.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone.